Hi, my name is Marty Owings. Welcome to the channel. A few months ago, I set out on a quest to find the best fountain pen. Since I'm a complete novice when it comes to fountain pens, I had to kiss a few frogs before I found a decent partner. I tested over 30 different fountain pens. None of them were the pens of royalty, though. That is to say, I didn't have the treasure to exchange for a Mont Blanc or a gem-encrusted pen. I definitely understand how fountain pens, especially high-quality vintage fountain pens, can become an obsession. Fortunately, I'm pretty disciplined about sticking to a budget, so I set a budget of around $250 total, and I shopped. My criteria was to find a great pen for writing, especially calligraphy or Spencerian writing. So that meant finding a great pen with a pretty flexible nib. Additionally, I wanted a solid daily writer, and if I could find a decent sketching pen, that would just be an extra bonus. So I watched about 5,000 YouTube videos like we all do when we're looking at something. I scoured the internet and learned two things pretty quickly. People are super passionate about fountain pens, and I might have to reset my expectation when it comes to finding a do-it-all fountain pen. I started like any sucker would by purchasing an eBay lot of untested vintage pens and pencils for about $100. The lot only really had about 8 vintage pens in it. Unfortunately, none of them were fully operational. I didn't feel too bad though because I grabbed some great pencils. There's a video on my channel where I go through the whole lot if you're interested. Then I bought a couple more lots for about 25 bucks, and using a little more common sense, I managed to score some working vintage fountain pens. I got a really nice unused Esterbrook, which I really like, and a few more working pens in addition to that. Then I spent about $100 to buy some modern pens, which included a Pilot Metropolitan, 2 fountain pen Revolution pens with ultraflex nibs, and a converter for the Pilot. I came in around $20 under budget, so I used that extra money to buy some Iroshizuku ink, which a lot of fountain pen YouTubers seem to like a lot. Between the eBay lots and the other pens, plus some pens I already owned, I tested 31 pens over the course of 2.5 months. I inked up all the working pens, and a couple I fixed up by replacing nibs and cleaning parts. I kept a decent log and notes about the pens. Then I narrowed it down to 8 pens, which you can see here. I included one pen which I really wasn't happy with, just so we could contrast against the other 7. These are the 4 pens I'll start with, including this Lamy, and this Lamy just happens to be the pen that I was least happy with. I know a lot of people love this pen. I just wasn't very happy with it at all. It never worked right for me. Even when it was brand new, it never worked right. Could be the ink, it could be user error, it could be the nib, the paper, it could be a lot of things. But the point is, compared to the other pens I tested, it just didn't work right. I cared so little about this pen that I spelled its name wrong. It should be Lamy with a Y, not an I. I get a lot of feedback from the pen. It's very scratchy, it skips quite a bit, and it never quite worked the way I expected it to. And now I tried holding it at different angles, and I did try it on some different papers, but the result was almost always the same. Maybe it needs a nib adjustment, or like I said, it could actually be user error, because I definitely hear a lot of good things about the Lamy Safari from the users out there in the fountain pen community, so we'll just have to see. Maybe you have a tip or a trick you could help me out with. The next pen is the Jinhao X750, which a lot of people rave about, not only because of the cost, but they generally think it's a really good pen. Although a lot of people in the fountain pen community swap out the nib on this pen, I did not do that. I'm just using the stock medium pen, but I did have trouble with it. I wasn't getting ink flow even though I had just inked the pen up. So I had to remove everything and start kind of from scratch. That's okay. After I did that, it seemed to work fine. It did pick up a little scratchiness on the paper, and there was quite a bit of sort of that scratchy feedback you get sometimes. It might be, again, the function of the paper, but I don't think so compared to some of the other pens I used. Overall, though, the ink flowed well, and it was a pretty easy pen to use, if not just a little bit heavy, because I think it's a metallic pen, so it was just a little bit heavy in the hand, but not bad. The next pen I tried is the fountain pen Revolution Himalaya V1. Now, this is the first iteration of the Himalaya that came out. I'm not sure what year, but people have recommended this pen because of the flexible nib and because it's a nice writer. So I tried it out, and I actually like this pen quite a bit. It does have a very flexible nib, although there were improvements in version 2, which you'll see in a minute, that kind of obsolete this pen for what I wanted it for. That said, the Himalaya version 1 performed better, I think, than the Jinhao, and certainly better than the Lamy I tested earlier. So I like the flex in this nib. It's nice. The ink came out well, and I never really had too many problems with this pen. So I liked using it, and the testing went really well for me. I like the nice line variation you could get from this pen. And like I said, it's probably a very nice writer. And yeah, and it comes in a nice green color. So the next pen is the Fountain Pen Revolution Himalaya version 2. This is the updated version of the Himalaya, and it is a spectacular pen. I love this pen for all the reasons that I was searching for, which is to have great line variation, decent ink flow, and the ability to add flourishes to letter writing and things like that. I just couldn't believe the amount of juicy ink that flows out of this pen, and it never stalls on you or acts scratchy in any way. I mean, maybe it's just because of the sheer volume of the ink that pours out of it, but it's really nice. This paper is decent enough that I'm not getting a lot of spidering and messiness, even though the ink is very thick, but it's just a beautiful pen. Time to try out the next 4. So I have this Noodlers Ahab and the Super 5 and a couple other different pens here I'll try out. And I like these pens all in all, so let's just take a quick look at them. Okay, let's start with the Noodlers Ahab Flex Nib. It's got some J. Herbin ink in it, which is a very nice blue. I just say right off the bat, spoiler alert, I love this pen. Not only as a daily writer, but this pen has all of the flexibility and line variation that you need to do really nice, elegant writing, whether that's calligraphy or Spencerian or just regular old writing. Its ink comes out nice and consistent. There's no scratchiness to it. It's just a well-built all-around pen that flows nicely. I think this is a stainless steel, and it's a flex nib, of course, so you're getting all of that benefit out of the pen, and it's just a really beautiful pen to use. I like it a lot. The next pen we'll try is a Noodlers Konrad Flex Nib pen, which is a very nice pen. I have this inked here with some Dominant Industry maple ink, which I picked up at Wet Paint, my local art store, and it writes really nice. I did get some railroading with it. I don't think it's as flexible as the Ahab I have, but still, all in all, it works decent for a daily writer. Sometimes it could be a little bit temperamental, but not a bad pen. I just didn't prefer it for the sort of calligraphy or Spencerian writing that I practice occasionally. So, but I do use it for sketching, so that's a nice benefit to this pen. Okay, on to the Pilot Metropolitan. This has a medium nib in it. It's a really nice pen. This is a metallic pen. It's a metal body, so it's nice and hefty, but not heavy enough to cause hand fatigue. And it is just a really smooth writer. The drawback for me with this particular pen is that the nib isn't very flexible at all. So it really kind of didn't meet my criteria for calligraphy or Spencerian writing. However, if you're just looking for a solid daily writer that isn't going to break the bank, this is an incredibly nice pen. I never had any problem with ink flow, skipping, no feedback. It almost feels like you're using a ballpoint pen. And I think this is a great sketch pen as well. I don't know about the fountain pen community, whether or not there are a lot of crossovers with sketchers, but this is a beautiful pen, and I think it'll work well for sketching. All right, last but not least is a pen I've owned for quite a number of years. This is the Super 5. It's got a 0.7 nib on it, which I believe is about a medium, and I inked it with some Dominant Industries maple color ink. It's a pretty good pen, and I loved this pen a lot when I first bought it. It's just that I got spoiled when I bought other pens that had even more flex and work even better than this pen. Now, I don't get a lot of skipping or bad behavior from this pen. It's just that it's, well, just as I say that, you can see some skipping as I write here. But it's usually really smooth, and I don't have any problems with it. No real scratchy feedback. It's a decent all-around pen. Well, at some point you have to narrow things down. So I narrowed my selection down to 3 pens. The Noodlers Ahab, which is a great pen, which I showed you, the Fountain Pen Revolution Himalaya V1, and Himalaya V2. All 3 of these pens are great pens and have lots of merit. For what I want to do with stencilarian and calligraphy writing, these 3 pens kind of fit the bill. They have the really flexible nibs, the ink flows well, you don't get a lot of scratchy feedback, they're very forgiving in terms of angle and things like that. So these were great selections. So for the Noodlers Ahab Flex nib, let's just take a quick look at that pen once more. Now you can see here that you can get a very fine line and then you can get that thick variation. What I like about this pen is that it never disappoints. It never mechanically bothers you. The feedback is always there, and it's just lovely to write with. Really, really exceptional. Now, the one thing is that you got to watch the ink level in it. Now, here's the Fountain Pen Revolution version 1, which I like, and it definitely comes in there as a really good writer with juicy ink flow and a nice flexible nib. And finally, the V2. It's got the ultraflex nib in here. I inked this with the Iroshizuku ink. I hope I'm saying that right, Iroshizuku. Anyway, it is juicy and the ink flows great, and I love it. This pen is outstanding. So to narrow down what pen would actually be the winner when we face all these pens off against each other, and after testing 30 different pens, well, the winner for me is the Noodlers Ahab. This is just an outstanding, consistent pen with good ink flow, nice line variation. It's not overly juicy, so you're not, running lots of ink out and it's going to spider on your page or anything like that. It just performs really well, and for an all-around pen that you can use for both calligraphy, stencilarian writing, or even sketching, this pen just really works magically for me. There's occasion where you're going to get some railroading, again, when the ink is a little bit low, but if you slow down a little bit, it works fine. And although you don't really have to do that too much, it's only, again, when the ink is low. So second place or honorable mention for me is the Himalaya V2. This version 2 pen is just beautiful. I love the blue body. I love the juicy flow of the ink. It really never disappoints, but these lines are a lot heavier, as you can see, than I'm getting from the Noodlers Ahab, and it's just a personal preference. Now it's time to do a little sketching. I'm going to use some different pens for this because I scored this cool vintage Esterbrook pen in one of those lots I bought. It was brand new. It's got a fine nib on it, but it was lovely for sketching. I really liked how it felt in my hand and on the paper. It's just a really nice pen. I had a lot of fun with this pen. So here's a few things I learned during my fountain pen quest. Fountain pens behave very differently from one kind to the next. Fountain pen nibs make a huge difference and are made with all kinds of materials, from steel to titanium to gold to iridium, as well as some other exotic metals. Also, inks make a difference, a huge difference. Did you know there are wet and dry inks? Silly me, I thought all inks were wet. Paper also makes a huge difference. For example, if you're using the wrong paper, your ink will spider and run and generally act in a very unbehaved manner. Also, pens that are great for writing may not be good at sketching and vice versa. And of course, the prices of fountain pens vary wildly, and spending a fortune doesn't always mean you get a better pen. I also found that my initial criteria for a pen might have been pretty unrealistic. To find an all-around pen that does everything, stencilarian writing, calligraphy, sketching, and just a daily writer is probably a little bit of a bridge too far. I mean, finding a pen that can do everything, that's pretty unique and special. But again, it's individualized. So you may find a pen that you like for most things, but not everything. Or maybe you find one that does everything you need it to do. I'm not sure that that's possible, at least for me. What I did find was that I loved using a variety of pens, and that's probably what drives people into fountain pen collecting in general. I also like doing ink washes, so I think that the inks make a big difference, and of course, obviously the nibs and things like that. In the end, I think I found a great pen for writing, but I don't think I quite have the perfect pen for sketching yet. Well, that just means I'll have to keep on looking and testing and things like that, which is also fun. Thanks for tuning in. So long. This has been Marty for owingsart.com.